Welcome to the show, everybody. I am super excited for this week's episode. I finally got rid of Corey. We brought a professional in. Welcome to the show, my brother, Jamie Cybulski.
Yeah, man. Nearly 20 years I've been doing the radio gig, and you start this podcast, and you finally asked me to co-host?
Yeah, man, I'm excited for this.
Good.
It's been tough with Corey. It's just, he doesn't have what it takes, you know what I mean?
Hey, dude. Sorry I'm late. What's Jamie doing here?
What's Corey doing here?
Jamie is the guest this week.
Guest?
I brought him in as the guest.
Guest.
Oh, okay. Okay. So Jamie, nice to have you on, man. What's your second story?
Well, welcome to Second Story, everybody. This week we've got a guest who's familiar to me and probably to lots of you as well. And that is my brother, Jamie Cybulski.
Is that what I am to you, is familiar?
Well, we don't live in the same town, and I try to avoid everything family related, you know?
That is true. That is our family dynamic. Avoid.
Yes.
No, it's great.
We
Thank you guys for having me on. This is awesome.
Yeah, you were our seventh choice this week. The other six said no.
Actually, true story. You probably don't remember telling me this, but you said, and I think you meant it in a nice way, that if we're ever slow or can't find a guest, we'll get you on.
That is exactly what I said.
Yeah, it was like helping me out, but also slapping me in the face pretty hard. So.
No word of a lie. I could show you the text messages. We tried to get James Cybulski for this episode, but he turned us down, and I said to Corey, well, I know another Cybulski that starts with J-A-M, and it's you.
Yeah, James,
and here you are. Basically,
you emailed James.Cybulski instead of Jamie. Yeah. True story, as we're talking about James, Simon Whitfield was doing a bunch of promo for chocolate milk one year on the show. We had him on, and he said, it's been a long time since I've seen you, man. How you been? And we're on the phone. And I always play along because I meet a lot of people. Who the hell knows? I might have met this guy down the road. And he starts talking to me, blah, blah, blah. We went about 5 minutes. He thought I was James Cybulski from TSN. And we finally made the connection. And I was like, that's absolutely hilarious. Not the right guy.
Yeah, wrong dude.
Yeah.
I did that when I lived in Vancouver. I got into a club one time because the bouncer thought I was James Cybulski. And I was like, yep, that's me. I used to work at the Score.
I think it'd be cool if we got him on next and like really screw with the audience.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Josh Cybulski, Jamie Cybulski, James Cybulski. It's too many Cybulskis, man.
You know, the Russians tried to get rid of us back in the day.
Wow.
They failed.
Jesus.
Welcome to the show, Jamie.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, good to have you. So we are, of course, Second Story. We talk to people who have gone through a life-changing event or a series of events that sent them down a different path. And for you, I think I know what yours is. It's probably fairly similar to mine, but I'm going to give you the floor here to tell us about what your second story is.
Yeah, I know when you asked me about that, we were kind of trying to figure that out. I had to dig deep almost to find it because, yeah, pretty normal life, normal upbringing, normal-ish 20s, 30s even, family man, small town, like all this stuff, and never had any addictions I've overcome, never... I was thinking, like, what would be my second story? And I guess it kind of came down to, like you, we're survivors of grief and survivors of loss, which I know is a silly thing to say because everybody has grief and loss in their life. But for the first 20, 21 years of my life, we were very lucky. Never lost anybody close to us. Had all our grandparents for the most part and just no tragedy really. And then all of a sudden we got punched with the loss train. The grief train came and drove right over us. But yeah, it was started as, I'm sure you've told stories on this, brother, but loss of our cousin who tragically passed away at 18 years old. And then from there, it just snowballed into father. I was 23 when I lost my father. And then following that, one of my childhood best friends a few years after that. And it just seemed like loss was just following me around. So with that, with loss, with grief, with a lot of people, it can lead down roads to addictions and trouble and just, mental health issues. Absolutely. All warranted for sure. So the fact that, I came out the other side of it and still forging on, I call myself a survivor of grief.
Yeah. Yeah. You and me both. Obviously everybody in life goes through grief and loss and things like that. Our family has kind of been, I don't know, it's like it baked in our DNA. There's been a lot of tragedy, and it goes back like way back within our family to the days where I was born. Like our cousin, I was supposed to be named
Tragic day.
Jonathan.
Yeah, that was a tragic day.
Tragic day. It was the worst day of my mother's life, that's for sure. No, the day, like a couple days before I was born, I was supposed to be named Jonathan. I don't even think I've told you this, Corey. And my cousin Jonathan was killed in a farming accident. And then I was born a couple days later, and my parents were like, well, we can't name him Jonathan. And that's how I ended up with the name Josh, because they were basically stuck. They're like, what are we going to call this kid? So they picked Josh. That's how I ended up with my name. But yeah.
Do you know what my name was supposed to be? It was supposed to be Luke. My grandparents lost a kid in childbirth, and they tried to actually pay my parents to call me Luke.
Interesting.
But instead, they
kind of
went with the most 80s name possible, Corey, and here I am.
That's hilarious. Well, it beats when they used to, back in the day, I read the book on our family coming over from Prussia, and there was a child named Peter on the boat that passed away, and then there was a pregnant Cybulski on there who named the next kid Peter. They just went with the same name, so they didn't even get creative.
Right.
Yeah, you didn't own a lot of things back in the day, so if two things said Peter, you just
went
like, wow, like, what are we gonna buy new thing? But we're gonna name the kid Paul and have to buy Paul stuff? Come on. Was
Walmart around in 1874? I don't think so. No.
I don't think so. I'm surprised we didn't end up with Peter. Anyways, so it is surprising that you and I ended up as well adjusted as we are, given that we did deal with a lot of grief and a lot of loss in our lives. I think we were very fortunate that when we did, we were at an age where at least we weren't teenagers. Like, I think it would have been a very different experience if we would have been younger trying to go through that kind of thing. Because we were in our early 20s. We were not established in any way, but we had kind of matured enough to understand it and process it properly. I say kind of because I still don't think I've matured enough, but
I think something that's always kept me from going down the whole pity party rabbit hole is that I always think there's so many people that have it way worse off than we did. I was lucky for 20 years, and like I have a childhood friend of mine too who lost his dad. I think he was 9 or 10, right? So you just always think he went through his entire teenage formative years without a dad, so it could always be worse. I think that's kind of kept my head on straight a little bit, but the numbness was one thing that I don't know if you ever went through this, but for the years after, like, I just didn't feel it's the weirdest thing to describe. I was in some relationships, but they were just empty, right? Like I just felt absolutely nothing after dad passed. And it took 4 or 5 years before I actually started to feel something again. Got out of my last relationship. And it really wasn't until I met my now wife that, I started to feel any sort of like, I don't know. Yeah. Just feeling again, so to speak. But I felt joy. That was the thing. Like throughout the years, I was still living life. And after dad passed, he was, as we know, like waiting for retirement. That was his whole thing, was saving up his whole life to retire and then didn't get to. So I'm like, you know what? I'm living now. So I did feel a lot of joy. I was surrounded by great people and traveled, did some cool things. So joy was felt. But yeah, in terms of relationships, and I feel so bad. I should probably call and apologize to those people. But just that weird emptiness. So yeah, it took, and then like, because everything compared to that moment, right? Like I always thought back to that moment when dad passed and sitting there beside his lifeless body is like, will anything ever make me feel again? Because this is, and it took a long time. But then everything after that too, like grandparents pass away, and it's kind of sad to say or sick to say, but it made it easier, right? Because everything again compared to that peak of dad passing away. So it's been mostly celebrations. We had a grandma that lived to 95, and I mean, I can say I probably didn't cry per se because it was a celebration, right? She lived a full life, and even our grandfather passed away 2 months to the day after dad, and I think you remember the emptiness everybody felt. We were just done at that point. So
yeah, I was really numb for that one. I was numb for a few years till I met my wife, Amanda, and then I had this weird moment when I met her. I was like, holy shit, I feel feelings again. Yeah. And I remember calling my friend Alex and being like, dude, I'm feeling feelings again. And he was just like, what?
I told so many people. Yeah, I told so many people that line, like, I feel again, and they'd look at me funny, but yeah, it's so true. And then when my son was born, like the floodgates just opened up. I was
Yeah.
feeling feelings all over again. It was incredible.
Has it gone the other way for you now where like you're almost feeling too much? Like you're over emotional with your kids and
No.
your wife and everything else?
My wife wants me. She gets so mad at me because she says I'm a robot, but I'm also like I show those kinds of emotions. Our mother taught us this because she had the ability in public to never shed a tear, but as soon as that private door closed, it's just like floodgates open, right? So I think I get a bit of that from her, where like I do a lot of woodworking in our father's shop still, and that's kind of my private sanctuary. That's where a lot of memories come up, and yeah, I've had a few private moments in there, but yeah, my wife probably, and we're coming up to near 10 years together, including dating, and she's probably seen me cry 3 times maybe. So she gets mad at that. She wants me to be more emotional.
Fair enough.
Are you saying I'm a robot? It's you.
What do you mean?
Yeah, that is kind of you. I would say I used to be like that, but I'm a lot more. I'm not scared to cry in public anymore. I've done it a few times.
Yeah.
You know, you skin your knee when you're riding your bike. You cry a little. It's okay.
Are you not wearing
It's
knee
fine.
pads still?
I wear the helmet, but not the knee pads.
Best choice mom and dad ever
Still
made.
falling off his bike. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Well, why do you think I need so many hip surgeries? I can't stay on the bike.
Give up biking.
Yeah, I should. It's funny, the three of us kind of share something in common when it comes to dealing with like grief and difficult times, and that is the fact that we all use humor as a coping mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
All three of us. I can remember the day of Dad's funeral, you and I, Jamie, just going off cracking jokes. And I think it actually offended some people what we were doing, but like it was our way of coping. We eulogized our father, and we didn't have anything prepared. Basically, our mom came over. She's like, "Do you guys want to just talk about Dad?" And I was like, "Boy, do I!" And we got up.
It was a roast.
Of us, and we literally just roasted him for like I don't know how long it was. It was a while, but it was just like just making fun of stuff for like 10 or 15 minutes. And then our mom came over. She's like, "Do you guys want to say something nice?" I was like, right. It's his funeral. Yeah. And then we said like maybe 2 or 3 really nice things about him, and we were off. But like the whole time just cutting him up about stuff. And it was stuff that like we would cut him up about in person. But somebody came up to me after the funeral, and it was like this older lady, and she's like, "That wasn't overly appropriate." And I was just like, in my head, I'm like, I don't care. Like, I don't care what you think. Like, this is how I'm processing my grief. I didn't want to feel like pity from everybody. It was my way of coping. Like, I was just kind of joking my way through stuff. And a lot of people think like, boy, that's offensive. Yeah, I know. That's the point of it. That's why I said it, is because I was joking my way through my grief. And I did that for a long time. I would make a lot of jokes about cancer, about my dad, about just grief in general. And eventually I got to a point where I processed it and got through it. And then I stopped making the jokes because I didn't need to joke about it anymore. I processed it and it was over.
Wakeline, I always tell people too, like, because a lot of people, they'll come to me if they lose a parent. I've had so many chats with people about grief, and I always say you'll get so much power out of a wake. And I honestly believe that, like, just seeing you grow up, you think your dad's your dad, right? Like, he doesn't have many friends. When we saw the hundreds of people coming through, that grown men in tears, it's like, my dad made that person feel that. Like, I left with just that hero impression of your father that most people have. Like, I thought, this guy touched so many people. It was so empowering. The funeral sucked because, of course, Mom picked Amazing Grace, but as one of the songs. But the wake was just so powerful. So I always tell people, like, just soak it all in. Just look at all the people that your father, your mother, whoever it is, look at all the people they touched and affected, and think like they took time out of their day to come here. That's huge.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Bad Workwear North America. They're a fashion-forward workwear brand from Australia with a wide selection of workwear for men and women that is not only durable, functional, but it is modern and stylish as well. With items like slim fit work pants, waterproof hoodies, as well as a robust women's line, you're sure to find something that you'll love. They offer free returns and exchanges on all orders, and listeners of this podcast can head on over to badnorthamerica.com, use the promo code SECONDSTORY at checkout to get 10% off their first order. Again, head on over to Bad North America, go treat yourself to some new gear.
I'm just picturing the scene of you guys like doing your eulogy and the audience just gasping like every other word, like,
Yeah.
oh my God.
Yeah. So another big part of my grief, and I think it's why I've always been able to talk about it without getting too emotional, is out of the gate, on air. Like, I'm just so fortunate to have the job that I do, and I've had a lot of people. It's probably one of the things actually people have commented most on is just my ability to talk about dad, to talk about cancer, to talk about what cancer does. Like, Relay for Life comes around that time of year, Brain Cancer Awareness Month. Like, I can just talk so freely and openly about it, and it's kind of been my therapy. I've been paid to essentially go to therapy in a way. And I don't even know if they care about all the stories, but Father's Day rolls around, I can reminisce about dad, lots of laughs. I can have those serious, heartfelt conversations for those that are going through maybe a first Father's Day type thing without a dad. Like, I'm just so comfortable, and it's been a topic. Like, I just love, weird to say that it's one of my favorite things to have conversations about, but I just love to hear how people process it, how people are going through it, and all the ups and downs you go through with grief. And yeah, people have found it comforting. I find it comforting. And I think I'm very fortunate to have the job I do because it's helped me a lot.
Yeah, I would never tell anyone that their way of processing grief is wrong, because we're all different people with different, characteristics that make us up. And for somebody to say like that's not the proper way to handle grief or to handle loss is so wrong. So yeah, when people used to say like you shouldn't joke about it, it just made me want to joke about it more, because it was actually it made me feel like a sense of power if I could joke about it, because it was almost like I'm not going to let this thing define me or control me. I make fun of the things that are, that make me uncomfortable or like that I don't like about life. I make fun of those things and make jokes about those things just because I don't want them to hold the power over me. And I think that's something that we as a world have gotten away from. And it's why so many people are so angry or like bitter about things. We've lost the ability to joke about stuff that upsets us. And I think we need to.
It's one of those things. I always hate saying the word expert, right? Like parenting expert or grief expert. Like, it's a topic that you can have knowledge on, but I've sat in on grief support groups and stuff, and they'll just tell you something by the book. And it's like, no, that doesn't work for everybody. Like, I've had instances where I spoke up and I said, I like to share kind of, if somebody comes to me asking for advice, they were trying to say, just listen, don't make it about yourself. Don't open up about your experience. I'm like, no, they want to hear that what they're feeling is normal. I would think, like, I read the room. If they want to talk, I'll listen. But if they kind of want to know what I went through, I'm going to share that. And I know for me, hearing other people went through the similar thoughts and experiences, that made me feel normal, right? That makes you feel comforted. So that whole expert in grief thing, I don't know about, but
yeah, it's true. Yeah. We are sort of made as a society to like defer to the experts on everything, and they're wrong about a lot of things. A lot of things.
I know a lot of people that have dealt with grief and loss. I actually did a short documentary last year on a couple of people that had like gone through suicide loss. No. I'm just wondering, for them, it seemed that it really changed their trajectory. Like, they had some growth, or it completely changed their path and their journey. Did you have anything like that, or did you have setbacks or anything like that?
Yeah, it was actually so much from the Ed Sheeran documentary. I don't know if either of you guys watched that, the 3-parter on Netflix, but he went through a pile of grief too. And the line he said was, it robs you of your youth. And I was, like I said, 23 when I lost my dad. And all of a sudden, I was in a position that I could get home enough to see mom. But all of a sudden, I felt like the man of the house, upkeep of the house, making sure my mom was okay, making sure she was staying social and doing all right. And all of a sudden, this burden became mine. It wasn't a burden. Any kid would do it, of course, if they had the ability to, again, be near or be in the same town as a parent. But I was fortunate enough then to get to move home. And she's had a man in her life now for 10 years, and we're so fortunate. Stuart's a part of the family now. And but again, he's got his own stuff too. So there is still a little bit of that. I had to become a grown up so fast, whereas I was early 20s. I was still supposed to be out there making mistakes, doing foolish things, getting arrested, all that fun stuff, getting fired, traveling across the country, getting hired by radio stations, but I didn't. None of that. So yeah, it definitely did change things. And It's often, I mean, I go down the rabbit hole sometimes in my thoughts of, if dad didn't pass, so many things wouldn't have happened in life, right? Like I wouldn't have made my way back home. The girl I was dating at the time was actually a PSW for dad when he was at hospice. So from there, that's what got me back to my hometown. That relationship didn't work out. That's what got me together with my wife and now my son. So it's like this snowball of stuff that, I mean, it's a pointless exercise to go through, but it has crossed my mind of all these things that, wouldn't have happened if dad was still with us. It's crazy.
Yeah, the stuff that happens to you often defines where your life will go, and it could be a good place or a bad place. For you and I, we're both lucky it went to good places. The thing you said about grief is so true. Like, my wife was 12 when her mom got sick. Her mom passed away when she was 17, and she was a grown-up as a teenager. Yeah. Like, she was literally a grown-up taking care of her sick mom and stuff like that. And if you look at her now, she's a natural caregiver and the most giving person I've ever met. And a lot of that is, the way she was raised, but also what she went through as a child is certainly a big part of that too. And it's baked into her DNA as well. But yeah, it's very true. So our dad was sick for not very long. He got sick in July and was deceased by January with brain cancer, glioblastoma to be more specific. And we didn't know for a couple of months what he had. It took doctors almost 3 months to figure it out.
Yep.
And by the time they figured it out, it was stage 4. So there was like a 15% chance that he'd live longer than 3 months. He didn't. And that was kind of it. But during that time, Jamie, you moved home to be with mom. We both lived away from home at that point. I was 6 hours away. You were, 2 and a bit? Yeah. Was there a moment when dad was sick where you were thinking to yourself, like, I don't know if I could survive this, like if he passes away?
No, not during. During was just like, there's so much adrenaline and right. It was just get up, go to work. I was fortunate my employer allowed me to work from our home station in Renfrew. I was leaving early every day. Like everything was just what you need, whatever. If you need a day off, tell me. So he was hands down just the best boss you could have had at the time. And yeah, it was just get up, adrenaline, right? I'd pick up mom after work, straight to the hospital, rinse, repeat, right? We were just doing that every day pretty much. And no, there was never, and it's funny because we look back, I'm a big advocate for hospice care now, palliative care. And we have a residential hospice in Renfrew, which is the first in Ontario of its kind, by the way. And when we were told or it was suggested dad should go to hospice, we fought it, right? Because we thought, we're not giving up. We were told stage 4, like it was right there in front of us. He was a dying man. But you're still just so full of adrenaline. You think he's going to pull out of it. You're making party plans for when he's announced he's cancer free and like all this naive again at the time, but you just keep going. But I remember the crash. Oh my God, the crash after when the drives to Ottawa stopped, when just everything, the go stopped. That's when I remember that hitting me, but holy. And hospice care, I know, like I've stayed so involved in that, but once we got there, so dad was super agitated in the hospital, right? Just could not settle. Within 24 hours of being in this facility, he was calm, right? He just relaxed. He thought he was home. There was wood furniture all around him. The 24-hour care, because they were leaving him alone at the hospital, no fault of theirs. We know of Josh's beliefs in our hospital healthcare system. Yeah, they're overworked. They couldn't give him the care he needed. So this place was unbelievable. And we left with good memories, which was a weird thing to say, but good memories of where your father passed away. We were so thankful. We wanted to do anything and everything we could for the staff. And I've joined the board since. I am an advocate for them, always on air talking about their events. And it's one of the things I'm most proud of in the job is just my ability to get the word out for them and do what I can for them. So
after dad passed away, what would you say was the low point you had?
Just the emptiness. And I knew I was feeling it and just going through the motions. There was time, I think I rewatched Dexter at the time and I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm kind of like Dexter. I'm just trying to fit in and just trying to pretend to feel and all this. But yeah, low point. I don't know. I didn't really have, like, I've never battled depression or anything like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I can't. As I was wondering that question myself, I never had like a definitive low point either. It was just a whole lot of numbness, not really feeling all that much. You and I actually had a similar summer, the summer after dad passed. So he passed in January, and the summer after we like traveled around. We went to a lot of concerts. We played a ton of golf, and that was super therapeutic. I would have fun, to go into your point of like, you'd feel like you were having good times and stuff like that. But I never really felt anything other than that. Like I would go and play golf and have a great time, but then like I would kind of walk away not really feeling anything. And then, I might go to a concert and during the concert have a good time and have fun and then come out of it and like not really feel anything. It was a weird like juxtaposition. It was very strange.
Yeah. One thing, and I don't know, I'm sure anybody could relate to this that's gone through loss or whatever, but it was funny because I wasn't living in the same town as Dad. So my everyday didn't necessarily involve him, but all of a sudden, and from that Ed Sheeran documentary again, he wrote the song Eyes Closed about it. It's everything, every part of your day, everywhere you looked, a reminder of Dad started to show up. And I found it kind of comforting. I really did. But at the same time, I was like, okay, you can go away now. Like you drive by a restaurant billboard. It's like, today, lasagna, 50% off. It's like, that was Dad's favorite food. Great. Used car sale. It's like, that would remind me of Dad. Like he never bought new. He hated new cars. He always bought used. Like just the dumbest little things that had nothing to do with Dad before he passed. All of a sudden, everywhere I look, I still see you, as the Ed Sheeran song goes. But so yeah, it was a wild time, but again, I found that comforting. I'm not overly spiritual, but maybe it was kind of Dad looking down on me. Who knows?
Yeah. Mine was always risk management. I would see risk management everywhere, and he loved to talk about risk management. Yeah. That was like his favorite thing, like risk management.
You've shared before, Josh, like your journey and how you dealt with it. It sounds like it's a little bit different. Like I'm thinking specifically when your dad was in hospice. Did you want to touch on that at all? Just how your journey differed from Jamie's?
It was weird, like being away from home. There were a lot of times where, so our dad got sick right at the same time that I got a new job and moved. And it was the best, financially, it was the best job I ever had, like paying job. Still pretty close to being the
better than this podcast.
No, this podcast definitely pays way more.
This thing's killing it, Jamie.
Yeah, big money maker. Bad workwear, by the way.
Yeah,
Corey's also got bad on.
Yeah, I got some.
Buy bad. Yeah, they're good. Yeah, so I was away. It was weird because I constantly had to obviously call for updates, and I always heard things sort of secondhand, so I didn't exactly know what was going on. Like you and Mom would get home and be, you'd have a long day driving the highway, going to the hospital, stuff like that, and then you have me calling, being like, what happened today? And a lot of days, like I don't think you remember because they all bleed into one, but not being there, a lot of days were just nothing. Like nothing would happen, and I was constantly like, I would go to work and then I would, commute 2 hours and what have you. And the whole day I'd be on like eggshells. Like, is this the day something happens? And then I get home and you'd be like, yeah, nothing happened. And it was a lot of that. It was weird. I was constantly in this state of like anxiety about what was going on, but I wasn't there. So it was definitely different. I think the worst part was when he passed. I don't know if I've mentioned this on the show, but when he passed, like I knew he was close and I went to work. I worked a night shift. Came home the next day, drove home that night, kind of being like, I wonder if this is the night. And then I went to bed at like 4 a.m. and woke up at 9:30 and I had 111 text messages and 240 Facebook alerts. And I was like, God damn. Like I didn't need to read any of them. Like, God damn.
That's how you
like
knew.
Something happened. And I picked up the phone and I called my mom and I'm like, hey, and she told me. Yeah. So I knew even before I called my mom what had happened. It was weird. It was messed up. That was the thing with like technology that was really bad, is that I basically got alerted of our father's death by Mark Zuckerberg. It's weird, very strange, but
that was nice of him to reach out personally. It was...
Mark's always got our best interests at heart,
Yeah.
Anyways,
he paid for the whole funeral. He was great about it. So.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was at work, so I think I got the call at like 7:20 something. I was supposed to do a live hit on CTV News Ottawa. I did a live hit every week there, and as soon as I got the call, I just closed the computer, just left. Didn't think of anything or anybody. 2 weeks later, I went back to work. I had an email from them. You're like, "You're not on. Let us know if it's not working." They just blasted me out. I'm like, "Oh, this is gonna be fun." My father passed away. I was like, "Eat it."
Jesus.
Anyway, I was never on CTV after that, I don't think. But
were you actually not? That was the end of it?
yeah, I think it fizzled out after that. Close to after that.
Damn, that sucks. Obviously, that sort of alerts people that, hey, you're in the media. You work in radio and formerly of television. Until you
briefly.
Briefly on TV. So you have had a very long career in radio, and it's weird because like the media landscape, it's not one that people typically get the kind of longevity that you've had in one place. So you started your career in the same job that you're in right now in, I guess, technically 2007. I mean, that was when you went full time, right?
Yeah, part-time. I've been with them since 2005, so it'll be 20 years next year. But yeah, full-time was March of 2007.
So until now, so a period of 17 years in the same morning show slot. They haven't got sick of you yet, which is surprising because I get sick of you after about 10 minutes.
I got hired out of college for evenings, actually. I was supposed to be 6 to 10 p.m. doing evenings. At that time, we had 3 radio stations. So I moved to Strathroy, Ontario. And the week before I was supposed to start, the afternoon girl quit. So I got a promotion before I even started and moved there. So I worked afternoons for, it was a year and a bit. And then 2008, August, that's when I got my first morning gig. I moved to Napanee and been doing that ever since.
You've been the morning show man for 16 years almost.
It's pretty, and that, like I joked about how, grief kind of robs you of your youth or whatever. I was supposed to travel across the country. The thing with radio is everybody's got stories of being fired, being hired, being fired, quitting, cursing on air, getting fired and going to another job. Like everybody's resume is at one end of Canada to the other. And yeah, they never fired me. So I never left.
Have you ever even had a job interview?
So that's the best part. I've never made a resume. I had one other job in my life. It was Tim Hortons, and the manager was Mom's really good friend. So the first thing she said to me, I filled out an application. So I've never written a resume, filled out an application. She sat down. She said, look, you got the job, but we're going to go through this for experience. So it wasn't a real job interview because I had the job, and that I never had a job interview at MyFM. And I've never had another job since. So yes, that's kind of something I'm hoping I can retire with, never writing a resume and never having a job interview. But on the flip side, if something ever happens with this gig, I'm screwed.
Yeah, you'll be in some trouble. You'll be coming to me and I'll be like, I'm dyslexic, but I'll help you. Sure. Yeah. I remember I worked at the radio station before you. The day it opened, I worked there. It was my summer after my first year of broadcasting. And I remember at the end of the summer, you were like, hey, can you see if I can get in as a co-op? And I was like, yeah, sure. And I went to work that day, and the owner, John Pohl, happened to be there. And he was like literally walking out the door, and I was in the sound booth. And I remember opening the door like this, be like, yo, John, can my brother do co-op here? And John's like, yeah, I don't care. And then like basically left. And it's like, that's Jamie's job interview experience right there. That was And then I told you to come into the office and meet him one day. You went in, and the rest is history. It's kind of hilarious.
You know what's crazy? And I don't think I've ever actually told you. I tell everybody else because I always say, how did you get started in radio? So I was actually a super shy, didn't say much. I was always the class clown, but for the most part in public, especially, very, very shy. So kind of came out of my shell in high school a little bit. I had a stupid band that kind of got me that adrenaline bug. Like I wanted to perform. I love being in front of crowds type thing. Loved to entertain. As I said, class clown. But it was hearing you when you used to do weekend news. I don't know if I ever told you this, but something sparked, something lit up inside of me, hearing your voice on the radio. I didn't understand how you go from being in that studio to over the airwaves. I still, 20 years later, have no idea how radio works. But something, it was hearing you. And then I did the co-op, and I remember sitting there every morning. I'd go in at like 7 something. I'd watch the morning team. Nothing in front of him. This guy that worked mornings in the early days had no prep, didn't do anything. He would just tell jokes, tell stories, pick on the news guy. I'm like, how is he carrying on? Just nothing, right? I was intrigued. I was sucked in, went to radio school, and just kind of, I got to that point now that I can have nothing in front of me and just ramble on for, has it been an hour yet? Close to, but.
Close. That is what this podcast is, where we barely have anything in front of us. Corey messaged me an hour before we started recording, and he's like, what are we even talking about? And I was like, I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Don't tell all our secrets, man.
Yeah, that is the secret. Do zero prep. Actually, this is probably the interview where we did the least amount of prep, because some of the other ones we've had to really do a lot. But
read their book or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, we've had to read some books or watch some shows, and radio's a funny thing. So I mentioned that I started before you. When I started and John was starting the radio station, I remember thinking, this guy's out of his goddamn mind.
Yep.
Like, radio is not going to last another 5-10 years. And this was before podcasts had really started to hit. I'm like, there's going to be something that comes along that takes this over. And boy, was I wrong.
Man, we were taught in school. Our professor taught us that podcasting and satellite radio was the next thing. Yeah, terrestrial radio was dead. We had a whole lesson one day on how terrestrial radio is dead. There's no future. Satellite radio tried, right? They had their moment. They still have their moment, of course. There's still people that listen, but we stuck there, right? And same thing, podcasting, huge right now. Like millions of people are listening in right now to your podcast.
To this show.
And
listen to this show.
That's what I mean. No, podcasting's, massive. The biggest probably right now out of all, but there's still that need for local news. There's still that need for people need to get up and hear their events, hear their weather, hear whose birthday it is. Like all the gimmicky stuff from radio days gone by that still clicks with people. And they still want to hear it. They want to hear that interview with the person who's hosting the charity run on the weekend. They want to hear silly people coming in, calling in for whatever silly reason I have. How to get a red wine stain out of a white couch. Like, characters come on the air with me all the time, and they just love listening to that. I don't think that honestly is ever going anywhere.
So how have you been able to sustain your longevity on the radio station?
Yeah, from John's point of view, from the owner's point of view, my predecessors, there's been 3 morning men before me. The first one was a drunk. The second one was wired so tight. He was like up to here all the time. The third one was a drunk. So honestly, he looks at me and I show up. I'm there. I'm positive. I'm not like an office cancer. I'm just like an easy guy to work with and be around. All of my co-hosts I've had great relationships with. And yeah, I'm so low maintenance compared to everybody else that I don't think the thoughts even crossed his mind. And look, I'm not going to go down as a radio legend. I'm aware of that. And I haven't done anything trendy or anything that's going to, make me whatever YouTube sensation. But it's just, I don't know. I'm real. I think that's one thing. I'm authentic. I'm real. And yeah, I've just been low maintenance for the guy. So I think that's kind of what's easygoing. I don't know. That's about the best answer I can give. At any point, I've thought, he could move on to, if a big name ever came in and looking for a job, like, yeah, I could get bumped to afternoons. I've always accepted that.
Did you ever have any like heroes in the space, like people that you looked up to?
Yeah, like growing up, I listened to Casey Kasem a lot, actually. We used to put the Scotch tape over the little corner of the cassette. I'd tape Casey Kasem, and it was the voice. Like, just the voice, man. It just hit you right in the soul almost. And the first mentor, really, the best mentor I've ever had, he was the third morning guy. He was a number 1, 12 years, Ottawa, major market radio. And my God, he had the voice. Like the moment I met him, he's just like, "Hi, I'm Kevin McGowan." I was like, "Oh," I just gave you that little. But literally, I trained him. I was 19 years old, and John said, "Hey, McGowan's coming in tonight. Can you train him?" I'm like, "What the hell am I going to train him?" He's like, "I show him the board, blah blah blah." He rolls in, nothing in his hands, 5 to 6, flips the mic at 6, and he just talked and nothing. Right? He had zero content, but I hung on to every friggin' word this guy said, because he could have sat and read the phone book, right? Could have been like Marie Campbell. Like, he just had that voice that you like, and that was his whole career. I talked to people who worked with him. I'm like, no, he never had content, but you just listened, right? He'd read the traffic report, he'd read whatever, and you're like, oh, keep talking to me. Like, he just melted you with his sound. But yeah, he was honestly, I didn't know. I was naive. I wasn't around addicts at all in my life, and he'd call me at night. In retrospect, it's like all these things. We would have hour-long conversations at night. I didn't know he was sauced up at all. But man, he took the time, and he took me under his wing, and he is still to this day. There's so many things that I learned from him about radio. He simplified it. The best advice still, everybody asked the best advice I've ever received. He was definitely pissed up when he said this, but he said to me, because he was talking about how you're in a cadence. He kept saying the word cadence, but couldn't define it. And he said, every show, it's the same thing over and over again. You got to treat your show like you're screwing your girlfriend. Come at it from a different angle, right? Try a few new moves. You know what? You're going to get hurt one day, and that's fine. You're going to learn from your mistakes. And still to this day, I'm like, every show, I'm like, all right, let's try something new for McGowan. Try a new angle.
New angle.
Treat your show like you're screwing your girlfriend. Like, oh my God. What a thing to say to a 20-year-old, right?
Right in your wheelhouse, I guess.
Wow. I guess he knew his audience, but oh man, he was, again, I just love the guy. I'd watch him, I'd study him. And yeah, I learned years later that I actually went to, I drove him because he made me drive for reasons I didn't know about at the time. But I met a bunch of friends at this fair. We were introducing April Wine to the stage. He was showing me how to do that. And at the end, I'm like, hey, a bunch of my friends are here, McGowan. I throw him the keys. And he's like, and in retrospect, he completely froze. I didn't know he didn't have a license at the time, but he white knuckled out of there, drove all the way back from Arnprior to Renfrew. I told John that story years later. He laughed, but no.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Do you think like the big morning show hosts, like guys like him, and I mean, there's a lot of them growing up. It seems like it's kind of a dying thing, like having the big name radio host. Is that gone? Is that finished?
Well, yeah, like the big voice that I talked about, right? Like these guys, they didn't have to have any personality. They didn't have to have any content or talk about anything meaningful. They just go on and read the phone book in their big booming voice. And all of a sudden, like everybody was hooked. So now it's like, I think authenticity is so big in this industry, right? Like those that make it, they're authentic. They're having real conversations, right? Like that's one thing John always says to me is like, answer the questions people are asking, right? Talk about the things people are talking about. And yeah, it's just kind of been on the back of my mind all this time. And like you hear people on the radio now with like raspy voices and even some high-pitched voices. God, you hear people with lisps now. And I mean, if they have good content and they're having meaningful conversations, absolutely you're going to get a gig and you're going to have longevity in this. But yeah, the days of the booming, we still have a guy actually in the afternoon who again just reads the phone book every day, but he sounds so freaking good.
Yeah. Reason I ask is because I do feel like that's kind of a dying thing. Like, when people go to independent media, like podcasts and stuff like that, if you've got nothing to say, no one's going to watch. Like all the late night hosts went and did a podcast. I don't know if you remember this, like last year, they started a podcast and there were probably less people watching that than were watching this because they had nothing to say. Like they didn't have all the fancy, studios, all the writers, all that stuff. It was empty. Whereas like here, we don't have any of that stuff either, but we got something to say.
No, it's so saturated now. There's so like, that's what I always think too. Like we don't really do much in the entertainment world anymore because somebody, by the time we tell you about J-Lo and Ben Affleck's problems, it's been on social media for days, right? Like everything, we used to be the one, right? When we were up against TV and newspaper, radio was the instant. TV, you had to get footage, go cut it, go produce it. Print, you had to wait a week to get your paper out. Like we could flip a switch and be on with information. Social media kind of stole that from us, right? Now they're instant, go live on every platform and they get it and they can go on without official. Like we can't just be willy-nilly on those like what's up community Facebook pages. We got to check our facts a little bit so we can remain a reliable news source. But yeah, they can go on. So it's that question every day I ask is like, what's somebody going to get from this show today that they're not going to get anywhere else? The music you can find everywhere. We know there's 101 places to get the music. So what are they going to get from this show? And it's me talking about life, me talking about my kid, my relationship, things going on. The big thing is the local. Again, it comes back to that where else are they going to have somebody talking about a fundraiser this weekend? I know it's dry. It's not the most uplifting stuff in some cases, but obituaries is another thing. Like it's a old practice in radio to have obituaries. We still do it. It's sponsored in every market. Like it's just people tune in for obituaries, especially in small towns.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
Did you have an obituary?
It makes a lot of sense.
That little while you worked on Weekend News, did you have an obituary voice? I say that because I always like your voice, just like, it's now time for today's obituaries. Like everything else, you talk, you're up here, you're excited, but all of a sudden your obituary voice would come down here.
I'll tell you a story. So I'll tell you a story about when I first started out in radio. I was doing evenings and we did obituaries at the time. and it was a dual newscast. So it was me and somebody else. I won't say their name because I don't know if they'd want this on. But they were doing sports and I was doing the news, and the obituaries were part of it. So I got into the obituary voice, and I was like, and I can't remember exactly how I did it, but basically like, and Matthew Burns passed away at the age of 72. And I like let it pause, and then the sports guy comes in. He's like, "And the Leafs are back in action tonight," and I just lost it. I just lost it.
Okay,
I was just like killing myself. I was like, "Oh my god, dude!" Like for real.
To play up on that night that I was training McGowan, I told you about, he came on after obituaries, and the song "Cutting Crew," "I Just Died in Your Arms" was scheduled.
Oh,
like just an oversight. Again, one of those coincidences, 1 in a million. But he could not go on. I never seen him laugh so hard. And out of the obituaries at the end, he's like, again, such and such passed away Thursday, blah, blah, blah. Oh, I just died in your arms tonight. Like, oh my God.
Oh no.
Cringeworthy.
Yikes. That's the only thing. That's the thing that happens in live radio is stuff like that.
You talked about introing like April Wine onto stage and stuff like that. What's the coolest thing that you've done in radio, or like the best interview you've had?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things. Like 20 years later, to still get the blood pumping and the adrenaline of this job. We just had actually in my hometown, Renfrew, we had a Queen tribute show, 1,200 people, and just I love being up on stage. That's like I thrive on that. And it's funny because I go to these hospice board meetings, and I'm the youngest there by 20 years, probably 30 years. And in that small room of like 10 people, I get a little, not nervous, but I'm more on edge talking in front of those small people. And people, their minds are blown that I just get up there and talk in front of 1,200 people. It doesn't bug me at all. I love it. But yeah, like April Wine, I've been on stage to introduce our local fair. So many bands have come in. Basically the Canadian classic rock, all those bands that show up at every fair. I've had them on the show. Honeymoon Suite, Kim Mitchell, April Wine, Alan Frew, Glass Tire, a couple members of them. Randy Bachman. Actually, funny story with Randy Bachman. So one of the things I always strive to do in an interview is ask them something that they've never been asked before, and just try to be memorable, right? Kim Mitchell and I got to a point, because he plays a fair every other weekend, that he kind of knew me by name and remembered me, so that was kind of cool. But Randy Bachman, at the end, I said, "Look, Randy, my wife and I are expecting, and I want to tell my audience, do you have any ideas?" So him and I brainstormed, and he's got a song, "Taking Care of Business," as we know, BTO. And he's like, "Well, the song "Taking Care of Business" kind of has a bunch of different meanings. You want me to come on and say like, 'Hey, I heard you took care of business' or something?" I'm like, Randy Bachman just suggested that. That's amazing. So that was a pretty cool moment, having him part of my announcement to my listeners that we were expecting our first child. Other people, God, I've had Jerry D on before. That was cool. Eric McCormick, funny story about Eric McCormick. So I didn't watch Will and Grace growing up. This was like, I was 20, just out of school. He was doing a Relay for Life promo. So I had him on, he's talking away. I didn't know who he was, right? So I just thought he was somebody with a story. I had zero idea. He's talking away. He's like, "Anyway, on my time on Will and Grace," and he's talking away. And then I'm in the background Googling, and I'm like, holy shit, this guy's a big deal. Then I got a little bit, got a little bit nervous after that. But early lessons to do at least a little research on who you're talking to.
You really turned into that person who had no paperwork in front of you. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah.
My first in-person interview was Colin James, another Canadian legend. Sat down with Great Big C. Like, I love the in-person, but yeah, I don't get nervous anymore for those. Like, they're more nervous, I find, than I am. And as long as you're prepared, right? It's most of the people I talk to are musicians. So music's, as you can tell from behind me, a little bit of a passion of mine. And it's just easy, right? And I don't even have questions in front of me. I just had a great chat with Andy Kim, who just celebrated 50th anniversary of Rock Me Gently. We had a 20-minute chat, him and I. Like, he was asking about my job, and I was just asking about his career and his life, and we just had a great chat. And like, it was just so cool. I had zero prep in front of me. We just kind of like what you guys do on your podcast. It felt like a podcast, honestly. And those cool moments, yeah. Probably the most, like the biggest. So mostly Canadian people I talk to, but Pat Monahan from Train. So I got connected with him. Train was doing something anyways. And I kind of watched some interviews, and I'd heard about him. I'd seen him on some stuff, and he's pretty dry. It's like, I feel like this is going to be pulling teeth. So I was a little more prepared for that one. But we logged on the Zoom call, and at the time I had my Pittsburgh Penguins jersey behind me. And Pat's from Pennsylvania. So immediately he's like, oh, we got a Penguins fan. And like, we just had this like click, right? It was supposed to be I think we booked out 5 minutes for the Zoom call. We ended up having a 20-minute chat and we just clicked. He was one of the best guests I've ever had. He was so good. I ended up packaging it as I had so much great material that I just packaged it as Pat Monahan co-host with Jamie on MyFM in the morning. He had no idea. I branded it for like 5 days, did promos for like 5 days. This Friday, Pat Monahan from Train co-hosting on MyFM in the morning, did a graphic up for our Facebooks, and it was hilarious. And it sounded so good. And he was an awesome guest.
Yeah.
And it's always cool. Like anytime I'm with them, I'm going to pick their brain for something more, right? Like that's my thing is I got these people. A Great Big C, my mom was a huge fan. I'm like, hey, will you sing my mom happy birthday? I have that file. Every year I can send it to mom. Be like, by the way, I did this for you, mom.
Oh, that's cool.
When I interviewed Bram, Sharon Lois and Bram, I think your daughter, Annika, I was like, I'm going to get him to sing Skinnamarink Dinky Dink for her. And he did. He gave her a shout out and said Skinnamarink Dinky, sang the song. Like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that was cool. Yeah, I remember that. You interviewed me a few times. I'm a little insulted that I wasn't in the list.
Honestly, the one I'm most proud of is our grandmother. She made John Paul to this day said she has the best radio laugh he's ever heard. She had this hearty belly laugh. And because she was kooky, I think she knew it. Everybody who knew her knew it, that you didn't know what she was going to say. So I know there was, when the Pope passed away, I'd have her on every day on Pope Watch. I'd call her every morning, be like, any news? Like we'd get her to be the update. And she, of course, like she doesn't get that I had her on radio. So she'd be like, dear, I need some toilet paper. Can you pick me up some toilet paper? They're like, yeah, Nanny, I'll grab you toilet paper. When pot became legal, 2017, I had her on that morning.
I remember that.
Oh my gosh, she was 90, whatever at the time. So funny. Just her perspective. And again, she asked for something on her grocery list at the end of it.
Yeah, nice. she'd ask like, I'm out of bacon or whatever. Oh, there was always this like looming concern that she'd say something racist or like not acceptable for the 21st century. Yeah.
I think she said of those people once. This was before Don Cherry's moment, but I always remember that after Don Cherry had his time. It's like, I'm pretty sure my grandma said those people. I don't know what she was referencing. Yeah. Not the same thing as Don Cherry, but
no doubt she probably did at some point. Yeah, she wasn't built for the 21st century. That's for sure.
Wow. The other thing too, April Fool's Day pranks has honestly been one of my favorite thing about this job. And I peaked too early because I haven't had a good one in probably 5 years. But actually you, Josh, have helped me with pretty much all of at least the great ones. There was like a 30-day stretch where we aired a promo in the market I was living in for a nudist colony. We were putting the feelers out if anybody wants a nudist colony. He said, look, we're going to make our decision soon. We made up an email address. They all came to me. Josh voiced it. And then on April 1st, it said, hey, we made our decision. Check out the website, blah, 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 nudistcamp.com. And it was a picture of me with a sign, April 1st, appearing naked. We got so many people with that one. That one was awesome.
I did take the picture. That was weird.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It was weird. Yeah. I also, voiced it.
Yeah.
I was very unemployed at that time. I had lots of free time.
Yeah. There's two others I'm super proud of. So it was around the time that Trump was building the wall. We came up with the idea that the Golf Course Association of Canada, not a real thing, wanted to build a net to keep the geese off of Canadian golf courses. So you hear that, it's stupid. You know immediately it's April 1st. But all of a sudden I had my brother voice from the whatever Golf Course Association.
Yeah.
I had a bird expert on talking about how geese only fly at an altitude max of 100 feet. So like all this. And that's just it, is keep going the extra mile, and people start to believe it. And my favorite one, if I could share this one, involved Jack Layton. I don't know if you remember this one, brother. Yep, so it was the year. NDP leader at the time. He was almost prime minister. He was right there. It was the year Charlie Sheen kind of went a little off the rails. And we came up with this whole backstory that Charlie Sheen had dual citizenship. It was during an election, a federal election. We came up with this whole thing that he's starting a winning party. So media, it's like, okay, this is stupid. April 1st. So all was well. When we were planning this the week of, I just by chance emailed all the parties, the three parties at the time, Liberal, Conservative, and NDP. Like, hey, we're doing this bit. Would either leader want to join me? Fully expecting in the middle of an election, not a chance. Within an hour, Jack Layton's people call me. They're like, Jack loves it. When can we chat? So I think that next morning, and he was like in full political mode for the whole chat. He's like, well, the thing with Mr. Sheen is that he's got his priorities all mixed up, and he's just going on. And it was so, and all of a sudden people bought it. People left that morning thinking Charlie Sheen was running for Prime Minister of Canada because we had Jack Layton on. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, it was so good. I remember you sending that to me. Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty good.
So, Jamie, how do you see podcasts differing from radio?
I kind of argue now because, of course, on radio we're told like keep it to 2 minutes, right? We're all about the music and news. Like they just want brief conversation. I'm arguing now people now more than ever want to hear conversations, and it's not even about anything really in some cases. Because let's think of podcasts you listen to. It's nonsense, but people who commute. I have a friend who commutes every day who actually I got hooked on your podcast. Shout out to Corey who's listening, another Corey. And yeah, he drives every day. You get tired of the music, right? You get tired of same music on certain radio stations that he loves and you become more engaged. I remember driving back home from Napanee too. I had Sirius at the time and I'd listen to Stern. 90% of Stern is nonsense, right? It's just them talking about their day, their life, but you're hooked because you just love that interaction. So yeah, I mean, podcasts are huge right now. We talked about that, but again, it comes down to podcasts are so broad that you're not covering anything local in them. So I still think we're always going to have that edge, and our local content's really what's keeping us going. And the whole model of our radio stations that John started was just hyper focused on local. And he targeted at first small communities like Renfrew. He started the first station in 8,500 people. And again, these businesses couldn't afford to be on Ottawa radio. So all of a sudden they're making commercials, hearing their business on air. And then he just start to land in all these pockets around London, Ontario, around Kingston. And now he's built this model and built this whole system that he's buying stations in Kingston now. And we're in big markets like St. Thomas is one of the bigger cities we're in too, just outside of London. Bell just sold off all those stations. He picked up 2 of those. Like he's just in a position now where he's taking his model and he is going a bit bigger into the cities. So it's working.
Nice.
Peterborough too.
Yeah, Peterborough. There's another. Yeah, he's got 2. Yeah. So I was, I think, the 6th or 7th employee in Renfrew, and we're now 21 stations when we add the 2 from Bell and closing in on 200 employees. So it's pretty wild that it's grown that much.
Actually, it's funny. Corey and I talked at one point about like, should we do a local podcast in one of the areas that we live in? Because I thought like that's probably a good niche to be in. We didn't. We started this instead. And we're killing it. Millions of listeners.
I was going to say you're going the opposite direction where you're trying to get like broad appeal guests. And I know you had a slow week. Thanks for having me on, by the way. But yeah,
yeah, you're welcome.
2 slow weeks. We did one solo last time.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. Last time we tried to get you on the phone, but you were too busy for us. You big timed us.
Believe me, backhanded like insults, compliments, call them what you want. Those are my absolute favorite. When people try to they'll tell me all the time. They're like, "Oh, but we listen every morning to you. It's so cool to hear you. We can't get any other radio station in our shop." All right, that was almost a compliment. Almost.
Yeah, pretty close. Yeah. So what is the future of radio?
Yeah, I mean it's a scary thing now because artificial intelligence, open AI, all those things. It's like I kind of sit back and think, why, that's exactly what I do for a living. Open AI now, and my owner. This is the scary part: is he is all about it. He is loving it. He is using it. He wants everybody to use it, like Chat GPT. So he does a show for our group of stations every Friday. The owner, John Pohl, does, and like he has characters through OpenAI he's created. He uses phoners through OpenAI. He scripts everything through OpenAI. Like I have yet to see a use for it in my own because I'm confident enough with my writing and my abilities that I haven't needed it. I just Google things, whereas he would OpenAI it. So again, to each their own on that. But he has he bought a station. It's actually FCC regulated, so it's over in the New York side, but it broadcasts out of Kingston. And when he first bought it, it was just kind of I think he was bored. Just bought a station and just everything. Whatever, normal Tuesday for him. Everything he did was through AI. So he trained it. You can train it to read from Environment Canada just the parts you want. He named them, and he created this thing that would read voice mixed down with the weather opener and closer and go to air. And you would hear it and you would not know it's not a human being. And again, I looked at him like, that's kind of what I do. And then he told me, he's like, I could take your voice, because I have like, all you need is a few seconds of somebody's voice. He's like, I could clone that, your likeness, and I could create an on-air character. And then it opens up that conversation of, if you did that, is that legal? And he's like, that's the thing they don't know. I'm like, do you own your voice? I'm like, I think I do. He's like, where's the paperwork? I'm like, good point.
Yeah.
I don't, where do you register your voice, your likeness, right?
Yeah, becomes an issue with property rights.
Scarlett Johansson just went through it.
Yeah.
Well,
it is going to be determined eventually.
Yeah, and it's at a point now that AI can script news stories, and like he does with weather, it can read them, it can put them on air, you can name them. And from his point of view as a business owner, there's no benefits you got to pay this person. There's no holidays you got to cover for this person. They're never late. They don't use paper towel in his bathroom and his water and his electricity. Like, he's going over all these reasons. So that's kind of the challenge he gave to the company. We have a retreat every year where all the stations get together and be better than AI. That was the message. It's like, how? Really? Like, it, in a sense, it's so the two things I know is AI can't make an observation and can't form an opinion. So I got to be more opinionated and more observant is kind of what I go in with.
Yeah, I would even make the argument that things like radio and like television and just the news industry in general became almost too robotic. Because if you flipped on the news over the last 10 years, you would flip to a source and they'd say whatever the story of the day is. Then you flip to the next one and it's the exact same opinion. Then the next one, same opinion, same opinion, same opinion. And the reason that alternative media has exploded the way it has is because you've turned on an alternative media and they're like, same story. They're like, this is the story out of this. And you're like, oh, that's different. And then you go to another alternative media source and they're like, actually, this is the story. And it's all different. They're not all in line with like the same narrative of a story. And that's what's really killed a lot of like what I would call corporate media, is the fact that everybody was saying the exact same thing because they all got the news from the exact same official source, versus like alternative media actually has people on the ground. They're like, actually, this is going on here. And they would tell their version of it. So if everybody goes AI, it's like, okay, but where are you getting your official stories if they can't form an opinion? And you go through like, I don't know, Environment Canada. I can remember reading the weather report from Environment Canada and then like looking outside and be like, oh, I just said it was sunny and it's pouring rain. It was completely wrong. Yeah, I've done that a few times when I was doing weather. So that's the tricky part that AI is going to have to deal with if that's the way people go.
Yeah. And well, it's tricky in news because you can't be opinionated in news. You got to be straight with news, right? So you can't really be doing that. So yeah, for me, like I'm not just going to come on and read a story about Jennifer Lopez and Ben Affleck and be like, here's the facts from the internet that AI could have read. We have to think of an angle. We got to think of something fun, an opinion, or something that no one else can get anywhere else type thing. Like, so yeah, it's coming up with just, again, fun angles, spin things. That's where you can have characters on. I mean, the days of characters kind of cliche at this point, but I still love a good character. I still love getting people on to play off of and whatnot. And a lot of the time you can get the character to say your actual opinion so that you don't offend anyone. That's a loophole I've found too.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Actually.
Or through our text line, I'll often make up texts that are actually my opinion.
You're spilling all your secrets. Your fans are like, that sounds like a Jamie opinion right there. Yeah. That's pretty good though. That's something I would have probably done. I mean, that's what you'd do too if you were to use an AI. Just get AI to kind of say whatever you want as sort of the controversial opinion. It's like, I never said it.
No, I would
AI
never.
did it.
Yeah, Rodney on our text line. What a racist.
Yeah, Rodney. Yeah, damn Rodney on the text line saying all those bad things about people.
Yeah, but I honestly, I don't know if my job, my industry's safe. I honestly don't know. I can just forge on and do what I do and still try to have, again, it's those meaningful conversations, and just the content that you can't get anywhere else is what I strive to do every day. So that's all I can do.
That's a market reaction, really. That's all you can do is give the market something it can't get anywhere else.
And might I add, I am paid about half a salary to do that. So,
well, you're half a man. You're doing half a job, right?
Oh my God! So it's hilarious in this industry because everybody thinks it's a well-paid. I grew up thinking, right, like everybody in radio, you're on the radio, you must make a killing. So I spent $20,000 going to school, and my opening salary when they offered me my job was $18,500.
Yeah. It's why I didn't go to a second year of broadcasting school. I got out and figured out what people were making, and I was like, Jesus Christ, I can't afford to do this.
My take home first year, I think, was $12,600.
I remember your rent was more than one paycheck.
Yeah.
More than the take home of one paycheck. Yeah, your rent in Strathroy.
Very silly. But I am proud to say I have doubled my salary since then.
17 years. Doubled it. That's great. Good for you.
No.
Yeah. It's good that you're keeping up with inflation.
Yeah. Yeah. Inflation's what, 2.7%, something like that. That's what the CPI says, 3%. So you're fine.
And I think that's honestly a reason too with the longevity of the job is I'm not a money hungry person. I'm a happiness person. So this job has afforded me just ultimate happiness, freedom. I've never been micromanaged. They trust me and I trust them. And it's just kind of worked that way. So I don't make a great living financially anyways, but I'm happy and I can come home. I'm off at noon every day. I have little side hobbies that I do, woodworking and cooking and whatnot. So I have ways to make my fun money, but I've never, and my wife is money hungry. She always has been. So we're so different in that sense. She's always said, ask for a raise. I'm like, that's why I have my job. In 20 years, I have never asked for a raise, not once.
Yeah. You ask for too much, they'll be like, well, we got to fire him now because he's asking for way too much.
Yeah. Well, and as soon as hard times fall upon, they do the finger thing. This name, this salary, bzz, gone. Right? I'm never going to be that guy.
Is that how they fire people? The finger thing?
Yeah. Name, salary, and they connect. Yeah. I'm way up here in the corner, top left corner. I'm safe.
Yeah. Just hanging out in the no fire zone.
Yeah.
Interesting.
When people tune into this episode, what would they take from it?
That hopefully they know radio is not dead. FM, terrestrial radio, not dead, not going anywhere, and always will have a place in people's hearts, lives, days, routines. I'm very proud of that, and I hope I can retire in one spot doing the same job all those years, and I'm going to retire having felt like I had a very successful career. No, I was never number one in a major market. No, I didn't make my hundreds of $1,000s salary and have car deals and car endorsements. I didn't need any of that. I've had absolute happiness throughout this 20 years, and I hope to continue to do that. And yeah, hopefully too, from our earlier part of our chat too, that people, talk about grief and can open up and joke about and find somebody. That's what I always say is my core group of high school friends. I never really talked to about the loss, about grief, never got too into it. But as long as you have one person, right? And I had my one person. I mentioned my best friend. That he was the guy that I would open up to. We'd have our heart to heart. So as long as you can find one person, you're never alone. Just talk about it and be open about it and be okay with breaking down in front of somebody. That's something I still have to learn, is not having that wall. We were built with a wall. Thanks, Mom. And I got to learn to maybe break that down a little bit more. My kiddo's helping. My God, he's welded me up a few times. So
nice.
I think your dad helped you put up a wall too.
Yeah, we were raised by two giant walls.
Two giant walls, which was good because one of the walls in our house collapsed when we were kids. So where can people find you?
Right. Well,
online, on the internet or the radios or not CTV, obviously. To
keep the magic of radio alive, I am in 10 small markets across Ontario every morning, and I live in every one of them. So don't let that destroy anything. But no, you can find us. MyFMRadio.ca is our website. You can learn about the company there and just all of our markets, all of our brands, because we have more than just I do the MyFM in the morning brands, but we have an oldies brand, we have a classic rock brand, we have stations in Niagara Falls now. Should have mentioned those earlier. Those are huge markets we bought a few years ago. We're all over Ontario and even into the States. FCC regulated station out of New York that broadcasts out of Kingston. But I am on social media, but I'm terrible at it. So one post a month you might get from me. My wife puts our life on social media, so probably
you're on social media.
Find her on social media, and you'll get to know a lot about me because I don't even know what's on there.
It's not good for you, dude.
Everybody says that in this industry. Like, how are you not on Twitter? How are you not on TikTok? It's like, man, I don't need any of that. I've never wanted that attention. That's one thing about this job too, is like I can be in the grocery store and hear myself on air. Nobody there knows it's me. Like I have that anonymity still. Those that grew up with me know me and that have gotten to know me, but for the most part, they have no clue who I am, and I love that.
Thanks a lot, Jamie. It was nice. I was going to say it's nice meeting the cooler, better looking, funnier brother. More successful too. I forgot to add that.
Nothing is more successful than this show, Corey. Nothing will ever be more successful than this show.
I don't know about that because remember I doubled my 18.5 salary, Corey. So I don't know if more successful, but hey, I want to thank you guys because I've listened to every podcast episode. You guys are great, and like I said, I love hearing meaningful conversations. It's one of my favorite things to have on my show. So you guys have had a lot of them too. Sorry I missed the boat on this one, but no, I'm kidding. It was great, and thank you for having a slow week so I could finally jump on.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for not replacing me yet.
That's the first resume I'd ever have to write is to replace you. So.